Resource guarding is a really important topic when it comes to dog training and owning a dog, and it's actually the source of a lot of issues that people perceive as a random aggression or just a dog being irrationally angry. In this video, I'm working with a dog called Bingo with very bad resource guarding issues, and spoiler alert, Bingo did bite me over the resource guarding, so it is pretty serious in this case, but I'll get to that when we get to the training. But in this video, I also want to go over what is resource guarding, what causes it, when is it considered too serious or very serious, common resources that dogs feel the need to guard, and of course how to train it, which is what I do with Bingo in this session. So first things first, what is resource guarding? It's definitely a term most dog owners have heard of, but aren't 100% sure what it actually is. And resource guarding is simply when a dog feels insecure about a resource, whether that is food or a toy, and feels especially possessive and displays aggressive behavior to protect that resource. This behavior looks like growling, whale eyes, which is when dogs show you the white of their eyes on purpose to kind of signal that they're uncomfortable, physically shielding the object, and of course, when it gets bad enough, biting. So what causes resource guarding? Resource guarding occurs when a dog feels for one reason or another that the resource that they're guarding is for some reason scarce, or if they feel that the resource is being threatened by something else or someone else, or if the resource is particularly high value to your dog. Usually it's a combination of those three why a dog displays resource guarding behavior. And essentially resource guarding, again, as a lot of dog behavior, comes from like their survival instinct. It's like almost an instinctual behavior, and it's essentially when a dog goes into survival mode to protect their resources. Back before dogs were domesticated, when they were still wolves, they had to protect their resources, their food, because it wasn't so easy to come by. So it essentially kind of stems from that, but today with modern domesticated dogs, it also translates, unfortunately, to seemingly silly things like toys or even beds that we provide for them. And one really important thing here also to note is that a lot of time dogs only display resource guarding behavior towards other dogs, and that actually is the case with my dog personally. He displays resource guarding issues, against particular dogs, and this does make training a lot harder. In this training, I'm focusing with resource guarding with humans, but when it comes to resource guarding against other dogs, the training would be slightly different, but the principles would still be the same, which I'll get to in a bit. Now, when is resource guarding considered serious? And this is an interesting question because the answer would be resource guarding is always considered serious. Even if your dog, let's say he's resource guarding food, and right now, the only behavior he's displaying that would prove resource guarding is like the whale eyes, let's say, or maybe even a little bit of physically shielding, but he hasn't gotten to the point where he bites you when you get close to the food. However, this is still considered serious because resource guarding often escalates unless it's treated at the beginning and you recognize it and you start training it. So if your dog is showing signs of resource guarding, definitely reach out to a professional dog trainer in your area, because resource guarding, as I said prior, oftentimes is the cause for things like unexpected biting that people think is out of nowhere. It oftentimes does root from resource guarding. Now, some common resources that dogs feel the need to resource guard. Number one is definitely food. Number two, probably almost just as frequently, is toys. But if your dog has more, let's say, intense resource guarding, he can even get to the level of resource guarding things like people or couches or beds, or even like just this general area that he's in. So wherever he is, the area that he's in, he's going to resource guard. And that is the case with Bingo that you'll see in a bit. He resource guards literally everything, including the air around him. I just want to reiterate that this session that I have with Bingo that you see is a training session for a dog that already has very, very bad resource guarding issues. But if you're interested in preventing resource guarding for your puppy or your new dog, or even a dog you've had for a while, definitely stay tuned. I'll make a different video on that. But let's get right into the training, and also let me go over a little bit about Bingo's history. Bingo is quite an old dog. I believe he's 14, almost turning 15, but he's very spry and youthful in some ways. But anyways, during his 14 years of life, he's been through a few traumatic instances, one time being caught outside when he was lost by animal control. Another time he was in Beirut during the explosion. It's very sad. So, he has a lot of trauma, which may have contributed to the resource guarding. But my theory would be that the resource guarding is more so something that he's, grown up with and never been trained on. So that's just why he's gotten to this point where the resource guarding has become so bad. But the trauma probably does contribute to that overall sense of being anxious and feeling the need to protect and survive. Now with Bingo, he literally resource guards everything, including his bed, and again, like I said earlier, his personal space he resource guards. So his owner actually did tell me that he has bitten people in the past because they simply got too close to him, even if they weren't even going to touch him or anything like that. If they moved their foot or hand 1 inch too close for his preference, he bites. That's what happened to me. It was all fine because he's quite old, so it's not like he has so much jaw power, but it definitely is super alarming that he's bitten people in the past and never been trained on this. So I really wanted to take this training super seriously and also super slow. Again, because he's so old also, it might be harder to break him out of that habit compared to, let's say, a puppy, but it's still worth trying because a dog that bites people is always going to be dangerous no matter how old or how small or what breed the dog is. So there's 2 main rules to training a resource guarding dog. The first one is to never punish. Never punish a dog for showing those signs that he's uncomfortable with you being near a resource, whether that's growling, whale eyes, biting, whatever. It's never a good idea to punish them by being like no or physically correcting them. That is not going to help here because that's not going to get to the root of his issue. The root of their issue with a dog that resource guards is, again, feeling like they need to protect a resource that they believe is scarce and feeling that threatening feeling whenever someone comes close. We want to change that feeling to thinking, oh, it's all good, anyone can come close and nothing bad happens. So number 1, no punishing. And number 2, going off the same breath, you never want to forcefully take away a dog's resource when they are showing this behavior. So if you've seen some of my other videos, you might know that I hate Cesar Millan. I think he's a terrible influential person in the dog training realm. But one video of his that really comes to mind with resource guarding that I think is the worst thing you can do and really goes against this point of never taking away resources forcefully is one time he was training a dog with really bad resource guarding issues over their food, and Caesar thought it was a good idea for training to forcefully take that food away. And when the dog, obviously got angry, he punched the dog, and that was his training. So those are the 2 things you don't want to do: forcefully take it away, and again, punish. So the reason for punishment, I already went over why you shouldn't do it. For forcefully taking away the thing, again, goes back to not addressing the root. The root is the dog feels uncomfortable that you're going to take away their resource. So if you forcefully take away their resource that they're guarding, you're just reinforcing that need for them to, again, be on edge and, worsen their resource guarding. So the whole point of training is to rewire their brain kind of and their behavior to realize that there's no need to protect. You're not going to take anything away. Just because you get close to their food doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. And that leads me into the principles of training resource guarding, which is the principle of training most dog behaviors, and it's counterconditioning and desensitization. And it's heavy on the counterconditioning. So desensitization, you might know, is just the process of slowly, exposing your dog to a trigger, something that triggers them, and increasing the frequency very slowly over time so that they become desensitized to it. That definitely plays a role in resource guarding training. But the really important part is counterconditioning. So your dog that resource guards already has this sense and this feeling when someone gets close to them while they're with their resource that they feel threatened, they feel negative energy, or not energy, but like negative emotions. They don't feel good when someone comes close to their resource, and their default behavior is to protect it. So whether that means biting, growling, barking, shielding their resource, it doesn't matter. They have this default go-to behavior and emotion. With counterconditioning, we want to change that emotional response to someone coming close to their resource from being threatened, negative, scared, anxious, to being calm and happy and actually positive. Because as you'll see with the training, we're actually going to start making them feel good when someone comes closer to their resource, not just neutral, but we're actually positive. And because of that, we're going to change their behavior from being things like biting, barking, growling, all that kind of stuff, to just being calm, maybe even happy that someone's coming close to their resource, and you'll see why in a second. For this training though, do not try this willy-nilly at home. This is definitely something you should do with a professional dog trainer. I just wanted to make this video to go over the concepts and show what a real dog training session looks like with a resource guarding dog. So the first step of training is to identify what resource that your dog is guarding. In the case of Bingo, I did start with his bed. That seems like an easy place. We know he resource guards that bed, and it's just a place that he can be where I can still create space between myself and him. You're going to want to leash your dog for this stage to make sure that they can't come after you in any case. Like, let's say they're resource guarding their bed, but they're really bad resource guarding, that even if you're a few feet away, they're gonna, run after you and bite you. You definitely want to have them on a leash and also a muzzle if possible. With Bingo, he did start with a muzzle, but since he's so not used to a muzzle, he was shutting down and unable to behave normally. So I asked his owner, take off the muzzle, and we were going to move really slow. So once Bingo was in his bed, I started to throw treats to him, making it very clear to him that it's coming from me, but still keeping my distance. Now what this does, and this is pretty much the whole point of resource guarding training, is showing him that good things happen when someone comes close to their resource. So before, he was thinking, oh my God, someone's coming close to my resource, they're going to take away my resource. We're going to change that to, oh my God, someone's coming close, they're going to add something to what I have already. So I'm not going to get my resource taken away, plus I'm going to get delicious treats on top of that. So when someone comes close to me, good things happen, good things get added, nothing gets taken. And that's the whole point of resource guarding training. So again, with his bed, I stood far enough away so that he wasn't uncomfortable and was throwing him treats. Now I let him move around from the bed, take the treats, near the bed, just very much going at his own pace. Something really interesting that happened was when we first commenced the resource guarding training, he was pacing around the bed and also kind of like definitely giving whale eyes, but also looking at everyone in the room to make sure no one was getting close. So we continued doing that with a bed. Then his owner said what he really resource guards though is these two specific toys. One was a pig and the other whatever. I think it was like a poop emoji toy. But either way, we brought those toys out and put them in his bed. So again, we're increasing the value of the resources that he's guarding. So once those high value toys were in his bed, we just leveled up again. But again, the training stays the same. I keep my distance to the point where he's still under the threshold. Really important for a dog with resource guarding to be under threshold, not to the point where they're so on edge that they can't even accept a treat. So making sure they're under threshold. And again, I'm continuously throwing treats near the resources to him to show him, hey, when I approach, treats come. I'm never going to take your toy. People are never going to take your toy. When people come close, you're going to get good things. Now, it's important to note here that what will likely happen is that Bingo might get used to me getting close over time because I'm giving him the treats, but he will probably still be super resource guardy with other people. So that's why, if possible, you want to do this with multiple people. But yeah, of course, in this case, it's me. So we kept doing that. Then something really interesting happened, maybe the highlight of this training session or the low light, depending on how you look at it. But I was giving him the treats, then one of the treats fell on the ground, and I'm so used to pointing out treats on the ground with my foot, because I do that with my dog, I do that with every dog I train, that I temporarily forgot that he doesn't like, feet being in his space. And so when I went to tap on the floor to show him where the treat was, Bingo came at my foot, bit me, held on for a second until his owner came to, tell him no. Then he went off and it was all good. It did hurt a little bit, but it was totally fine. But this was definitely my mistake because I got too comfortable that I forgot how intense his resource guarding behavior is. And this is, I think, a really good lesson, obviously for me, but also for anyone training a resource guarding dog. That's why it's so important to stay under threshold. And it's so easy to think, oh, we're doing so well, it's all good, until at one point you cross that line by accident and they let's say, act out, even though that's not what it is. And this again is why it's really important to work with a professional when you're doing resource guarding, because with resource guarding, a dog could be totally normal, not show any signs of being uncomfortable until you get to their resource, and then they almost, to someone that's not aware, switch 180 degrees to like this crazy aggressive dog. Of course, we know that that's not what's happening. They're just trying to protect their resource, whether it's food or the air around them. But that's why with resource guarding dogs, it's really important to, consult with a professional, train with a professional. So basically throughout the training, it's not that exciting to watch, I guess, because again, you want to keep your dog under threshold always, but it's all about, counter conditioning. Teach them that when you come close, something good happens, not something bad. So also, if this was the case of food, what I really like to do is when you feed your dog, you put the food down, walk away, give him space to eat, and then while he's eating, you can get close enough to where he sees you, but not where he's, again, still not under threshold, and throw some pieces of cheese or meat or some really delicious stuff his direction towards the bowl, so that he sees when you get closer, good things happen. And as you progress, again, this was one session with Bingo, so I didn't progress much because we want to go slowly. But over the course of several weeks, as you progress, you can get slightly closer and closer and closer to add those valuable things to them near their resources that they're guarding. And eventually, most dogs will be able to learn that, okay, when you get close, you're not going to take their food and you're going to give them something good, so they won't feel the need to do things like snap at you or bite you or stuff like that. So training is one thing, but equally important, in my opinion, is managing a dog that resource guards. So especially if you often have guests over or you have kids, it's really important to do correct management skills. The first management skill I always recommend to a dog that resource guards, but even a dog that doesn't resource guard yet or whatever, is to allow them a safe place to eat. You never want your dog to feel threatened when they're eating, because again, food is probably the most valuable resource in their life ever. So you always want to give a dog a safe place to eat, whether that's in their crate or whether that's in the kitchen, but everyone leaves the room when they eat, whatever it may be. You always want to provide them a place where they can eat without feeling like people are all around them, even if they're not necessarily coming close to your dog directly. You just don't want them to be eating in a place of commotion with a lot of people around or other animals. Secondly, if your dog resource guards things like toys, you want to make sure that your dog's toys are controlled by you when they're available. So for example, if your dog resource guards toys, you don't want them to be laying around when other people come over or other dogs come over. So again, with Mochi, he resource guards his toys against other dogs. So whenever he has his little play dates with other dogs, we put his toys away and it's all good. So you want to just manage it so that the situation never occurs in the first place. And then lastly, of course, you want to muzzle your dog if your dog is muzzle trained. So if people come over, just to be safe, muzzling your dog is probably the easiest way to ensure that nothing happens if a guest mistakenly stumbles too close to your dog around a resource, like the case of Bingo. And a golden rule for managing a dog that resource guards is just to accommodate where it's easy and possible. Of course, training is very important, but it's also equally important to accommodate for them when you're not training and before they're, kind of more rehabilitated. So for example, with like the eating alone thing with even my dog Mochi, even though he doesn't resource guard his food at all around us, it's just easier to just let him eat alone. And it doesn't affect me at all to let him eat alone in the kitchen and us leave the room for those 20 seconds that he's eating. So if you have a resource guarding dog, just accommodate where possible, just to avoid those situations that your dog does feel the need to guard or escalate even further. With Bingo, it'll definitely be a long journey ahead, but I definitely have hope because this sort of counter conditioning training to teach them there's no need to resource guard and to teach them that good things happen when people come close to their resources is definitely just something so worthwhile and so effective. So subscribe if you want to see more of Bingo, because we'll definitely be working more with him, and stay tuned for more real life dog training.